Hey, this is Seth Parnell, minister at the Portia Church of Christ, and this is episode 135 of Midweek Bible Study. Hope that you are doing well. Hope things are going your way. We appreciate you being here and studying with us, and hope you can survive all that rain that we got yesterday. We had a ton of rain. I was coming back from lecture yesterday, and it was coming down pretty hard. By the time I hit along the ridge and got past the caravan. So, got a lot of rain. Hopefully, you do well in that. And we appreciate you being here tonight. As we always do, we want to first say hi to Dunlap. Hope you guys are doing well. Good to have you guys here tonight. And we always want to let you know that you are invited to Portia Church of Christ. We are located at 307 South Jackson Street in Portia, Arkansas. Right now we are meeting at 10 o'clock for Bible class on Sunday morning, 11 o'clock for service. We are meeting at 5 o'clock on Sunday night and 6 o'clock for Wednesday night service. And so if you're in our area, you should come see us sometime. We would love to see you. We would love to talk with you, worship with you, be with you, twice with you, brothers in Christ. And so hopefully, if you're in our area, you can see us sometime. Right now we're having 2 Bible classes. We're having our Sunday night Bible class. Royce Lusk is teaching that one. He is going over some of the lesser known prophets. Some of the prophets that don't have very long books. Kind of the prophets, or not really just prophets, but some of the kind of shorter books in the Bible. Like John, 3rd John, books like that. And on Wednesday night, we're going over the book of Matthew. We just got finished chapter 23. And so we're moving into chapter 24, getting pretty close to the actual crucifixion of Jesus. And so I know we're going to have some good class sessions coming up with that as well. And we also want to let you know that it's if you ever want to ask us questions, if you ever want to suggest, topics or verses for a future episode, if you ever want to, need us to clarify, something, then please feel free to get in contact with us. We would love to talk with you. Don't want any misunderstandings or anything like that. So feel free to get in contact with us. We're pretty easy to find. So shoot us a message, or write down what you think about what we studied tonight in the comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say. But as I mentioned, I went up to this week is the Freed-Hardeman Lectureship of the Freed-Hardeman University. And if you're not familiar, Freed-Hardeman is a university up in Henderson, Tennessee, and it is one of the few. Let's see here. Let me show you. What it looks like. One of the few universities that is affiliated with the Church of Christ. You've got Crowley's Ridge College in Paragould, then you've got Harding down in Percy, Arkansas, and then you've got Freed-Hardeman down in up in Henderson, Tennessee. And there's more, but those are probably the closest around this area, whereas colleges that are associated with the Church of Christ. So they have a lectureship every year, and I like to go up there and get some good lessons. You see some good people, and try and kind of enjoy what they have to offer there. They have a pretty big big campus. There's a big place that they have for vendors, for people who have written books, or companies like College Express, books. .com, or different ministries. They have booths out there. You can go check them out and see what they're doing, or sign up for a newsletter or something in order to keep in touch with them, to see how they're doing. But the core of the lectureship is the lesson itself, and those are there's some pretty good ones this year. There's some good ones that I enjoyed, at least the ones that I was able to do. I got there in the evening on Monday, and I left in the early afternoon on Wednesday. And so got to see all of Tuesday, got to see a little bit of Monday, a little bit of Wednesday, and like I said, there was some good stuff there. The theme of the lectureship was based on Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, and kind of centered on the question that Mordecai asked Esther. He said if oh wait, sorry about that. There we go. Let's see here. All right, is that better? I didn't know that was on. It wasn't coming through here on my end. But hopefully that's better there. I didn't know that was going the whole time. All right, good deal. We got that sorted out. All right. And so yeah. And so it was based upon Ezra and Nehemiah and Esther, and of course, and so that was where all the kind of the themes and the topics from the lesson that was going on. It's good to see you, Greg, here. Hope you're doing well. Hope everything's going good your way. Always good to have you stop by. And during this week, I kind of finished up my my notebook that I got. You see here, it's filled it all the way up. I know you can't see it probably for the focus, but these are all of my sermon notes for a while. Whenever I listen to a lesson or a sermon, then I usually like to take notes. Kind of helps me focus a little, and so I finished up. I have to find another notebook now, but I finished it up during this lectureship. But the first one that I was able to see was the keynote before Monday night, and it was done by Chris McCurley, who used to be a minister up in Batesville, which is pretty close, to Portia here. And his topic was the idea of a community, and how the church has a role in kind of facilitating community among its people. He kind of illustrated it as a way in which people can come together, but it doesn't mean they're necessarily together. There's a difference between that group of people with a united purpose, a group of people with working towards a common goal, and a bunch of people that have gathered in the same place. If you've ever driven around Jonesboro, around 5 or 4 or 5 o'clock, you'll know that there's a lot of people that are on the roads there. But do they have the same purpose? Are they going the same place? Are they going to the same direction? Well, no, they're not. But yet they're all grouped there because they're passing through that area. You can have a lot of people in one place and they not be together. But a strong church is one that is united. It's one that has a purpose in mind. And so he talks about this idea of building community among the church, and it is it's a important thing to note, because as we said, the church is not something that you attend. It's not something that you go after, or it's not something that really you go from place to place. But the church is made up of individuals. It's something that you engage with, as one of the points that he made. Like we always say, you don't really sometimes we use it synonymously. We say we're going to attend a church service, and sometimes we refer to where we meet as a church building. But we know that the church is made up of individuals who have come to be obedient to Christ, and have put on Christ in baptism, and have been a group of people that are working towards that goal of heaven. But he says one of the points that he made was that you can't that can't be your primary focus. It's important, but you can't build community for the sake of community. But instead, you have to start with Christ. You have to start with Jesus, and have that overflow into creating that community among your church. It's not just the people who lead singing, or the people who teach classes, or the people who do any number of those things. It's not just about them. But in order for a church to be strong, they have to be, the entire church needs to be someone who is growing spiritually. And if that happens, that kind of automatically leads to that sense of community among them. As we referenced with as he talks about in Acts Acts chapter 2, a verse that we're well familiar with as people who have been around for a little bit. It, it talks about in verse 37, it says, "Now when they heard this, they were cut to the heart, and said to Peter and to the other apostles, 'Brothers, what should we do?' Peter said to them, 'Repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ, so that your sins may be forgiven, and you will receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. For the promise is for you and for your children, and for all who far away, everyone whom the Lord our God calls to him.' And he testified with many other arguments and exhorted them, saying, 'Save yourselves from this corrupt generation.' So those who welcomed his message were baptized, and that day about 3,000 persons were added. And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and prayers." And, there was a great sense of community, with the early church, and they were someone who were who were on the same page. They were working towards the same goal, and that the starting point for that was because they obeyed the gospel. They listened to what Peter had to say. They said, "What shall we do?" They were convicted in the heart, and they were baptized for the remission of their sins. And as it says there in verse 41, they were added to the church during that time. And so that's where you start in building a community. And if somebody has been baptized into Christ, which is not not the finish line, but it's the start of a whole new journey. It's the start of looking forward to a life that glorifies God. If you have someone who is looking forward to that, then you're going to want to the person that's on your right to succeed. You're going to want the person on your left to succeed. You're going to want to strengthen anybody that you can, because that builds that community among the congregation, and those relationships can help strengthen people, because as we know, we can't get through this life by ourselves, but we have to be someone who sometimes relies on the strength of others. And good for us, the church is able to provide that for us. I also went to a lecture on the background of Esther. I went through two of them. One of them was the background of Esther, and the other one was Esther, fact or fiction. Talking about how some of the arguments against the canonicity or the authenticity of the Book of Esther. Some critics have claimed that the Book of Esther does not belong in the Bible. Have claimed that it kind of lacks inspiration. It lacks some of the other hallmarks that are present in the other books in the Bible. And the background of Esther was an interesting one to take a look at, because it was a little bit more technical as far as the information that was presented. These types of lessons they're not really a salvation lesson, but has to do with giving information to better understand a book. And some of the common, arguments against, the authenticity of the book of Esther are that if there's no references to it in the New Testament. As you know, there's a lot of books in the Old Testament are referenced by people in the New Testament. There's a lot of references to the book of Psalms. There's a lot of references, to the book of Genesis, to Exodus. There's some references, to Chronicles, and to Jonah. There's references, in the New Testament, that talk about things that went on, in the Old Testament. But with Esther, there's no references to Esther, in the New Testament, which is one thing that people kind of sometimes hang their hat on. There's also a kind of there's a pretty wide accepted theory that the Book of Esther was accepted late, into the canon, and how it was. It kind of came in at the last, moment. It wasn't, really accepted fully by everyone. But when the Bible was being, put together, it was kind of put in there in the last minute. And also, we know there's no mention, of God, in the Book of Esther. The name of God is not mentioned throughout the entire book, and it's the only book, that has that, which is interesting. Some people have honed in on that and saying it doesn't deserve a place, in the scriptures for that. It's good to see Kathy here. Hope you're doing well. It's good to have you here tonight. Hope you've been having a good day today. We appreciate you being here tonight. And so, those are some of the arguments, against, the Book of Esther. But and some of the sources, like, Herodotus, who was a historian of the time, he doesn't mention Esther, in his history, and rather he mentions Vashti, who was a queen before Esther, but he doesn't mention Esther, herself. But if you read throughout the Book of Esther, you'll know that there's a big period of time that, from the first couple of chapters to the last, part of the book, that I think it's like 4 years, between the early parts of Esther and the latter parts. And so there's a lot of things that could happen, in that time frame. The story of Esther is not, chronologically, it's not, really concise, but it's something that takes a while to unfold. But there's also several arguments, for, the inclusion of Esther, the archaeology that has been, uncovered, and the description of, for instance, the city and the palace and the cultural customs of that day are spot on, by the book, of Esther. When they describe the courts of the palace and everything, they are very, very well done, with Esther. And some people, cite, the numbers, as we know, when Esther kind of stands up for her people, she goes to the king and asks the king, to protect her people from Haman, who is wanting to destroy them. And the compromise that they came to was that Israel was allowed to defend themselves. They were allowed to defend, their lives from the people that were going to oppress them. And when they did, I think it says about 500 people were killed in the capital, and thousands were killed, throughout, all the empire. And some say, that those numbers are not realistic. But the Persian Empire at this time was a very, very large place. It was a big, empire. And so when you take the full empire into account, those numbers aren't that astronomical. They're actually very, very realistic. And Esther is also mentioned to be in the canon by early writers such as Josephus and Eusebius and Origen. And it is something that where we see that some of the early writers include Esther. And even though the name of God isn't mentioned in the book itself, you can see God's fingerprints all throughout, the book. It's a book that, exhibits a high degree, of providence, and the providence of God is going to be the focus of another lesson, that they had in the throughout this lectureship. And I went to, that was the background of Esther, and I went to another similar one that kind of dealt with the idea of whether it was factual or fiction, and it had some similar themes to it, and we won't go over that because we going over this one, but I found it, I learned a lot, about the Book of Esther, and some of the interesting things that go along inside it. And I highly recommend it to read it if you've never read through the book, of Esther. Another lesson I went to was one that focused on gender ideology, and it was kind of dealt with the kind of the promotion of like same-sex attraction and things of that sort, and the idea of transgenderism, and how that is something that has seen a very rapid rise in our culture. The speaker, I think his name was Sokolowski. He showed some data of how the if you break it down, the data by generation, those who kind of claim to be part of the LGBT community has sharply risen. If you take a look at some of the previous generations, to mine, I'm referred to as a millennial. I was born in the 90s, and so the millennials kind of see a spike up, and then when you get to generations after mine, Gen Z and the like, it rises up even sharper. And so the promotion kind of this in our culture has seen a very, very rapid rise in those who kind of either are attracted to the same sex, or kind of go do away with the kind of the traditional ideas that we know of gender. And we know what the Bible does. It does speak on this, and we know that it's something that is sometimes at odds with our culture. And we always want to approach things with grace, and with and with kindness. But we also have to be someone who is strong, in our faith. He talked about how one of the things most highly prized in our culture today is the individual expression of oneself. To live up to kind of the highest standard that a person can have today is to express something that someone feels inside, and kind of manifest that outward. And that is people, and because of that, people have taken some of these things that they do and kind of made it their whole identity. They have made that a part of who they are. And so a lot of times we use that phrase, hate the sin, love the sinner. We kind of use that in reference to this problem for a very long time. But nowadays, that's not something, and at least from the perspective of many people who deal with this, they say that that's not possible, because if you criticize, what they do, they take it as criticizing, who they are. And we love everybody. We want everyone to come to the knowledge, of the truth. But they see that instead of as an attack, or a admonishment, on their behavior, they see it as an attack on themselves, and that causes them to kind of resist it. Now, there's a lot of things that we can go over on this, as well, but the idea of ethics and morality being relative, being what's good for you is good for you, but what's good for me is good for me, kind of thing, is another thing that's kind of led to this rise. And some of the glorification of those practices have, like I said, has risen sharply in our world today. But the important thing is to always keep our identity, in Christ. Christ is the one who we should have our identity, in. And if we start there and work down from there, we know that we're going to be in the right place. And so we always have to make sure that our identity is not in something that we do, but in something that we serve, and that, of course, is Christ. The keynote for that night was a man by the name of Eric Owens. He talks about the holiness of God, and how we're called to be holy as God is holy. He said, in order to understand how we lose holiness, and how we as people, we as a church can lose holiness, we need to understand what holiness is. And we know that it is being set apart for a purpose. It's being separated for a purpose. And so when we talk about being holy, that's what we are referring to. And God has called us, to be that way and to have that holiness, about us. And Christ is that only source. You can't find, a source, that will cause you to be holy from anywhere else. But Christ is that only source, to look forward to and to understand. If you try to find it in some other thing, then you're not going to get, the real thing. But it is, to be associated with Him, we must be holy. And it's something that Israel struggled with. If you read throughout the Old Testament, that Israel struggled with that. For a very long time. They would be faithful to God for a little bit, and then they would start serving idols and start serving graven images and things of that sort. And in the end, it was something that caused them a lot of problems. It caused them to go into captivity, the northern kingdom first, and then the southern kingdom, and it eventually caused them to lose that position that they had. And Ezra was a kind of a demonstration of trying to lead the people into holiness. You read throughout the book of Ezra, you know that he led many reforms. He led many efforts in order to take Israel and cause them to come back to God and to start serving God in the way that he required. And he caused that to be something that they looked to. He talks about the prayer of Ezra and how Ezra was someone who prayed a lot, and he prayed with a lot of honesty. Ezra admitted to the state that Israel was in. He didn't kind of paper over the cracks, or wasn't someone who kind of diminished the wrong things they were doing. But Ezra, he was very honest with God. He said, we are in a bad situation, and we need to change. And Ezra was a very good leader. He was someone who didn't always have the success that he wanted, but he was someone who, when you take a look at as far as people who do their very best and lead with everything that they have, Ezra was one of those individuals, and he was very committed to change. And so the changes that he put forth wasn't something that he just said, but he was very committed to seeing it through. If we're going to make changes in our area, in our world, we're going to have to be committed to them. We can't just start something and then walk away. We got to be committed to seeing it through. And Ezra was one of those people. And so he kind of finished with that by saying, make sure that you are holy before you try to spread the good message. Make sure that you as an individual are holy, because ultimately you are the one that will have to answer for that. And there was also a lesson on providence. I know we're about 31 minutes in here, and so we're going to wrap up in just a second. There was a lesson on the providence of Esther, and how Esther was the idea of providence is all over the book of Esther. You say things that happen, just so, and it's difficult to think that happened without divine intervention. The idea, providence, is God working through the natural law, through the natural creation to accomplish something. A miracle is something that is outside the bounds of nature or the bounds of physical laws. And providence is God working through what has already been established, and it's highlighted a lot, in the book of Esther, and the it shows that pretty clearly. The we are called as a people to be dedicated to that, and I think that's important to know. But it was a great great week of lessons. It was a great it was I think it was a good thing to be there, and I encourage, if you ever have the chance, during the lectureship time, you go up there and listen to some good lessons. I know that you'll be blessed by it. I know the Crowley's Ridge lectureship is coming up at the beginning of April, and the Memphis School of Preaching lectureship is going to be at the end of March, I think. And so those are some that are coming up that are in our area, and so I encourage you to check those out, as well. But I think that's all we have. I can go on about other things that we talked about, but we're about at our limit here, and so we're going to kind of sign off for now. I hope everyone has a good night. I hope you have a good one. We appreciate all you guys for being here tonight. We will be back next week for another episode of the Midweek Bible Study, and I think we see, who are we having next week? I think we're having Cameron Knabe and his wife. I think we're going to be on. We're going to talk about relationships, and with Valentine's Day coming up, we always do an episode on relationships, and so we're going to see what those two have to say concerning that. But I hope you can join us, and we would love to have you. But until then, I hope that you are someone who can go out and to be the light of the world. And thanks to everyone who joined us. I hope you have a good night, Greg. Hope everything goes well. And I hope you can go out and be, like I said, be the light of the world. Be someone who glorifies God in everything that you do. And we'll catch you next time.